It's been an interesting couple of weeks. A particular problem that I'm having is figuring out how to organise this whole, to learn how to structure this entire thing, which is a problem all of its own, which I'll get. It's a lot of stuff to keep just in your brain. I need somewhere to put it down. So I made a community post. What a pickle. Now, I'm not exaggerating when I say that organisation has been a massive barrier to me in some of my previous novel writing. It's really weighed me down in a lot of ways, and maybe you know how it feels. I've kind of developed this problem as I've developed my writing. So my first novel didn't really have enough plot that it needed any organising, and subsequently wasn't really enough plot to fill out an entire book. Same really goes for the second novel. By the third novel, I was thinking about different layers of story and subplots, and I was trying to organise characters and build them out and make them feel a bit more real. And I started to develop this pattern. All the big moments of the story, the plot, and the themes and the motifs, they would all come to me at the start, and I'd have them locked in, write them down, good to go. But then as the small details, you know, those little things that just come to you as you're writing that make the story better. As those came to me, I had nowhere to put them down. I didn't know what to do with them. I'd just write them in a notebook or just forget them. And as my stories got more and more complex, my organisational deficiency grew along with that complexity. I definitely lost ideas that would have added value to my stories just because I didn't have an accessible, tidy place to record those ideas. But now I think I've found the solution to that problem. And if any of that sounded at all familiar to you, then this could be the solution to your problems too. For a bit more context, here's something else I said a couple of weeks ago. But a few of you also suggested stuff like software and gave me a few examples of the stuff that you use. I'm definitely open to software like that in the future. I really wanted a place where I could assemble the skeleton of my story and at the same time a place where I could flesh it out. And that place turned out to be Campfire. And I know this is a sponsored video. Thank you so much to Campfire for sponsoring it, by the way. But I genuinely do think this software is great and it's already solved loads of problems for me. I just got back to novel writing after spending years writing short fiction, and the single biggest problem I was facing was how to organise multiple strands of story at once to create this bigger narrative. Until a couple of weeks ago, I was stuck in a confusing Google Docs and post-it notes hellscape of my own invention. I needed a way to look at my story and figure out how it all connected. And when I started my project on Campfire, I noticed immediately that it does that, and a bunch of other stuff. And it's the most customizable writing software that I've ever seen. So let me show you my project. So this is my project, Project Ventus, and that's not the real title of the book, by the way, it's just a code name, I suppose. This is the project homepage. It's the first page you log into when you open Campfire. And as you can see, it's got some useful stats, which I really like. So I've already spent over 17 hours writing this story just within Campfire. There's also a notes section down here. I've just put remember why you're writing in that, because that tends to be something that if I forget and I just automatically auto-write, the quality tends to dip, so I need to bring myself back to remembering the purpose of the story I'm trying to tell. And it's just nice to see that on the very first page when I just log in. All these boxes you can resize and move about however you want. It's customizable. So if you've watched any of my other videos, I talk about the fact that I'm a visual person all the time, and the way I approach story is kind of visually, really. And luckily for me, Campfire really supports that in a big way. As you can see, I've got this kind of logo thing that I put together from some stock photographs and a typeface that just nice as a nice banner to the opening of the project. You can customize quite a lot about how the software looks to suit your particular project. In fact, you can apply a theme that covers all the fonts and all the colors and the backgrounds and stuff for every project that you do. So I've created one for Project Ventus, so I'll put that on now. So I just go to details and theme and I change it to Project Ventus. So as you can see, the fonts and the text color and the background and stuff has changed. This actually matters quite a lot to me. I really like to feel immersed in whatever project that I'm working on, and just to be able to create an environment that represents my story is really useful for inspiration for me. But of course, it's not just about how the software looks. It has to actually help you write. That's the most important thing. All of these options down the left-hand side, these are the things that help you write. And over the last couple of weeks since I started using this software, it's been some of the smoothest and most productive novel writing ever for me. It's helped me realize that there are a lot of aspects of writing that I've always just internalized for some reason, the main one being characters. In my previous novels, I've thought a lot about characters, you have to, but that was the extent of it. I thought about them. I didn't really get anything down. I didn't really collect any information about them. I've always tried to think up a flaw for my character that matches in with the narrative of the story, but the thing is, novels take ages to write. They take a long time, so some of that nuance and some of those little ideas can get lost along the way. Sometimes the shine went off things before I even had a chance to use them, just because I didn't have them in front of me. The other day, I used Campfire's character element to actually put something down about my character and capture all that information. And at the risk of sounding a little bit dramatic, it helped bring those characters closer to life for me. That's what it felt like anyway. So the most striking thing, first of all, is probably that you can add images, and a lot of writers, I think, would use actors for this. I just didn't think to do that. I just grabbed a stock image, but you definitely can. And because everything in Campfire is customizable, I went down here and I added a bunch of different elements to this character profile that I thought would best fit and help me to write my character a bit more accurately. So I added this plain text box essentially, and I've called it history. And I'm just going to put the history of my character in this box. It's actually already there, but I've just deleted it for now because there's some inaccuracies in it, and I want to make sure if I'm posting it anywhere that it's actually up to date and relevant for the story. But other than that, there's a physical traits box, and as you know, well, you may know, if you've watched any of my videos about description or novel writing or flash fiction, I don't really describe the physical traits of my characters ever at all, but I left that panel in there just because I know so many people really love that. They love to read it and they love to include it in their own writing. I'm very much in the minority by just not engaging with character description very much at all, but it's there anyway, so you can add in whatever physical traits you want. But what really impressed me about the character section when I first started looking at this is the attributes thing. It's just extensive. So obviously you can have their name and their age and their origin country, all that stuff. But there's also all of these different attributes, and you can change the values for each of these. So you can build a character however you want. The cool thing about this, I think, is that I would never have thought about competence specifically as relates to my character. It's just kind of abstract. You kind of tend to think in choices. Would they do this? Would they do that? But with this, you can actually add an attribute for how sympathetic someone is, and that can help inform your story, I think. I've also added a box here for fears and flaws. You have to have a fear and you have to have a flaw for every character. They need to be vulnerable and they need to be human, and that's fears and flaws tend to make that. So I've put a few things in there, and then I've got space elsewhere in here in the history section, for example, to draw on that a little bit more and just flesh it out. I also added another custom text box at the bottom for personality type, but my approach to that I'll talk about a bit more in my next video. But essentially, instead of all this information being kind of abstract and known to me in a vague way but not written down anywhere, now it's all here. When I need to think about how a character would react to a situation or what they're most likely to do on hearing bad news, I can go through, and if I had set all these attributes, which I haven't for laziness, then I'd have something to go off. I'd have something to inform that decision. We all know what it's like to look at a blank page, and really anything that stands out and can give you a little leg up to carry on with your story, I think is great to have. And essentially this is just going to help me stop forgetting things, which is really valuable, obviously. There is even a separate tool just dedicated to creating an arc for your character, which is further down here. Imagine having all of this information at your fingertips without having to remember it all or flick through notebooks for it. There's a place dedicated for it. You know exactly where you're going to find it. It takes just a few seconds to open it up. Campfire is browser based, so you write your story into it and it gets saved privately server side at Campfire. That means you can open and close your project on multiple devices and just carry on where you left off. That's perfect for me because I spend the majority of my writing time at this desk on my Windows PC, but of a morning I do generally tend to wake up, grab my Chromebook and just carry on writing while I'm feeling productive and not too tired. What I like about the fact that it's browser based is that there is no saving. There's no version 1.2 final version .doc. There's none of that crap. It just saves and works. And how it works is really straightforward. The biggest problem I had with Project Ventus, and I've talked about this at least 10 times in the past couple of videos, is those separate strands of story that I was trying to write simultaneously or in parallel with each other. I needed to know how to actually set them out on the page. The system I had before was a Google Docs document where I would write a chapter, then switch to a different strand of story, and then switch to a different one after that. And then by the time I came back to go into the first one, it was buried some way down the page and I'd have to bring it back and paste it underneath. But then if I did that, How do I know what order I want the chapters to go in? It was a nightmare, essentially, is what I'm saying. It was a nightmare. Campfire's built-in manuscript feature makes that really easy. You just create a new chapter, and then you write in it, and then you get a list of all your chapters. You can just move them about exactly wherever you need them to be. It's simple. You can write straight into Campfire as you would with any other writing software, obviously, as you can imagine. But one thing that I like about it is this navigator panel, which allows you to bring up separate elements of your story just as a quick reference instead of having to go to the actual page for it and come out of your writing, stop what you're doing, check something, make your way back and carry on writing. You don't have to lose your train of thought or your little burst of energy with this navigator panel. You just open it up and check something. Oh, there's the history of my character. That's the thing I wanted to know about. You just go back to writing. You don't lose any of the flow. I really like that. In my last video, I talked about Project Ventus and said that it was probably sci-fi, and I was having a hard time figuring out if that was really the case. And then I had a funny realization this week. I was looking at my new bookshelf, which my wife has kindly organised for me beautifully, thank you Hayley, and I realised just how much sci-fi I actually own and read, so probably makes sense that I'm writing a sci-fi story. And if I'm going to write sci-fi, then I'm going to have to learn some stuff. Quite a lot of stuff. I was a humanities kid. English was always my best subject. Science, not so much. I just got by. But luckily, within Campfire, there's a research element too. Here, for example, I've made a research entry just about the setting of one of my research bases. And the neat thing about this is you can actually add links to external websites and it will pull the contents through for you. And then you can tidy it up a little bit and you have all the information that you need right there in the research document. So I can keep track of everything that I need to learn about, and I can add things for a later date when I know I need to come back and learn a bit more about what I'm writing. That's really useful. And I don't think it's just the research element that helps you with genre-specific stuff either. It's all really friendly to sci-fi, but I think if you're writing something like fantasy, it has a lot of stuff that you might need. You can use Campfire to create your own languages or religions or species and keep track of your magic system. There's so much stuff you can create all within one piece of software. But what if that stuff doesn't really apply to you? What if you don't need any of that? Well, in that case, you can just go up here and you can just filter the elements that you don't need. So if I didn't need magic or species, for example, I just filter them out and then they disappear from this list. But to go a step further, what if you're like me? What if you'll never need to plan a magic system? What if you'll never need to create your own religion or your own language? Then there's all this functionality within Campfire that you're never going to take advantage of. Well, I said that Campfire was customizable, and in fact, it's modular. If you don't want to use the species element, for example, then you don't have to use it. And you don't have to pay for it. You can outright buy the software for life, or you can get an annual subscription, or you can get a monthly subscription. But whatever the case, you don't pay for the stuff that you don't want to use. Personally, I think that's great. It makes the software less bloated and more useful and more accessible. My other favourite elements, or the ones I found most useful in my project so far, are first of all the locations tab, and I've used that to create a page for each of the research bases that form the setting of my story. So I just created this image, yes, in MS Paint, of the main floor plan for one of my stations, and I've added a little bit of atmosphere by putting in some snowy photos, that kind of thing. Here I've also used a box to link the characters from that particular storyline so that I know which ones they fall into. And speaking of characters and how they relate to each other, I've also used the relationships element to create this web of characters for my story. So you can see the white lines connect who knows who, or who interacts with who, while the coloured lines represent each strand of the story in each different location. But most of all, above all others, the element that has answered my organisational prayers is the timeline element. I've been looking for something like this for quite a while. I mentioned it in my community post recently, and in my last video I banged on about it a bunch, but I was looking for a place where I could create plot points and move them around and reorder them and connect them in different ways to see how the story I wanted a place to visualize the entire story, and Timeline does exactly that. Here's my timeline. Those strands of story that I keep banging on about, here they all are. These horizontal bars are each of the strands of story, and this one, and this one are all the comings and goings at each of these research bases, and the other three are just separate branches of the story that might be less frequently seen, but no less important to the story. Each box within that is a chapter or a plot point. These are designed, they're called events in the software, and they're designed to be exactly that. Plot points, bullet points, beats of the story, whatever you want to call them. Now, I might have come at this slightly unconventionally, because what I've chosen to do is make each of these points actually a chapter from the story, and those chapters are linked to the manuscript feature. So if I zoom in a little bit, we'll see that this one, for example, links to that document there. The dotted white line represents time, essentially, and how these events, or chapters in my case, link into each other chronologically. The coloured lines I just use to help me keep track of the different regions, and because there's a line between them, you can see there's one further on if you're looking at a certain point. So if you're looking for something, it helps you to figure out where it is. You can just grab chapters and slide them around, and the ability to do that has made a massive difference to me and how I'm able to visualize this story. If I need to add another chapter, for example, I just add an event, and then I can move it anywhere on the timeline that I want, and it just fits into the story. Overall, it just really helps me monitor the pattern of this book, which is something that I haven't been able to do before with previous novels. I'm making great progress with this book, and I'm finding it just really fun to sit and write every day. I can't help but work on it, and I think I'm doing a decent job at being accurate to what I want the story to end up being. I'm already looking ahead to things I want to do with it at the end of the story and how it's all going to end up looking, but I'm trying not to rush through it. I want to write it purposefully, kind of slowly, really, so I can keep an eye on the overall quality of the writing. But the ending of the story brings me to one thing that I think could be improved about Campfire, and that's what you do when you finish your story. If you're looking to send your novel to a friend or a literary agent or an editor, then you need to be able to export your work. And while Campfire does have an export feature, and you can export to docx or PDF or HTML, any of that stuff, you can do that. However, you can only do it chapter by chapter. There's no option to export the entire manuscript in one go. So while it's completely possible to do that, and you could just export your chapters like that and then put them together elsewhere, I think the better solution right now is to just copy and paste them into another document just so that you've got it all in one spot. For the export tool, I'd love to see a list of the elements in your project that you could tick or untick depending on whether you wanted them to be included or not in your export, and to export it all at once in bulk. Along the same very specific line, another feature that I'd love to see is the ability to print your manuscript, because when I finished my first draft of anything, I give it immediately to my wife, unfortunately for her, and she likes to look at things on paper so she can write me encouraging little notes in the margin. So having the ability to print, that would be really cool as well. Having said that, I would of course have to finish the book first. Overall though, I am genuinely impressed with the detail and the functionality within Campfire. It has no doubt about it improved my workflow and increased my productivity when it comes to writing. I definitely encourage you to have a look at Campfire. There's a link in the description of this video if you want to check it out. There's a free version to look at, and there's just so much to it that I didn't even realize I needed, and I've barely scratched the surface in this video of what the program can actually do. I'm well underway with this book now, and it's really starting to feel alive, and I think the reason for that is that I've recently discovered a way to almost have characters make their own decisions within the story. It's this one thing that I never considered doing before, but I think it's going to add a load of depth to my characters really easily. So that's going to be my next video, so don't forget to subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Thanks so much for watching as always, and happy writing.